Okay. Hi, I'm Luann Worley. I'm here with Rockin Book Reviews, and I'm excited to have Donna Hatch with us today. She is a remarkable, talented author. And I want to start out, Donna, and having you just tell us a little bit about yourself, like how many siblings and where you grew up and so forth.
Well, I have three older brothers, so that makes me the only girl, and yes, I am the baby of the family. I grew up, well, we lived a lot of different places. I ended up going to 9 different schools. So I don't really have any one place that I call home, really. Most of the places that we lived in were in Arizona. We were in Northern California for a while. And I think I kind of did leave my heart in San Francisco Bay Area a little bit. I love the beach. And my hobbies and interests, well, as a kid, I loved to color, and my mom would read stories to me. And of course, as I grew, I learned to read. I like to write from a very young age. I also really love to swim. I I would have a lot of neighborhood kids over, and one of our favorite things to do was to play mermaids in the swimming pool. So that was fun. And I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, it was, I'm sure, very difficult switching schools so often.
Yeah, being a new kid is not all it's cracked up to be.
Did that cause any problems as you were growing up, or?
Yeah, I would say, well, I'm already a fairly naturally introverted person just by nature, but I think it made me much more shy. And I always ended up making at least one really good friend everywhere I lived. So that was good, but it's a little lonely. And I think I probably did a lot more writing as a way of leaving off some of that loneliness. I was an avid journal writer for a long time, and I would make up my own stories. I did read a great deal too. And I got really involved in music, theater, and often that's how I kind of found friends in each new place that I went to. I would join a choir, audition for the advanced chorales, and I play the harp. Actually, a lot of my favorite activities are fairly solitary: writing, reading, playing the harp. so
So is that one of your main inspirations which inspired you to become a writer, is because of your solitude so much?
maybe. Or maybe it's more like I have these voices in my head that won't leave me alone, and I can't resist them. No, I don't know. I've always been an imaginative child. I always was playing make-believe, either acting it out or just writing it down. Um, Writing is a great way to kind of, I think, process the world around me. And of course, inspiration can come from anywhere. But I think as a kid, I would write a lot about things that were actually happening and sort of internalize it. And of course, the real stuff went into my journals. And then the how I wish it had been, or how it could have been, or how I wish I'd handled it, or bringing in magic or monsters or whatever. Of course, the bully at school was usually some horrible monster, but then that kind of helped me process it, and I think that probably just fed my writing obsession.
It always amazes me when authors tell me that, because I always had a vivid imagination as a child, and I always liked writing, but I don't hear voices in my head.
That's good. Yeah, annoying.
Okay. Think of a couple of memories from your childhood that you feel had an impact on your future years, and in what ways?
This is a tough question. I had a school teacher. It was, I believe, 7th grade. Was my core in English teacher, who I somehow found the courage to confide in her that I really liked to write stories. And she started funneling some of her favorite books to me. And we both really loved fantasy at the time. I still like it, fantasy. And she really encouraged me to write, and planted the seed in my head at that time that I could possibly be a novelist and get published. Of course, I had no idea how to go about doing it, and really didn't think I was good enough. But I had written at that point, I think 2 novels, handwritten, a couple of 100 pages each. I'm sure they were horrible, but
That's great, though.
she saw some potential in me anyway, and really encouraged me to pursue that dream. One of her favorite authors at the time was Andre Norton, and she got published at the age of 17. So she said, I challenge you to beat that. Of course, I didn't. I had no idea how. But she's the one that really made me think that this could be taken more from writing stories for my own entertainment or therapy, if maybe that's what it was really, and turn it into something else.
I think that's a great story. I think it's amazing. Okay, you write all these wonderful historical novels, and you have a lot of romance and adventure. What is your favorite one so far?
You know, I always laugh when people ask me that question because it's kind of like choosing a favorite child. You know, they all have different challenges and things that we love about them. And I consider a story successful if I fall in love with the hero. And so each time a new book comes out, that's kind of my new favorite, sort of like the new baby in a family. We all, you know, enjoy the new baby and fuss over them and worry over them the most, and the others are kind of off doing their own thing at that point. So it's really tough for me to choose a true favorite and not just, oh, here's my newest one. Isn't it shiny and pretty and new? So I can say that probably the easiest one to write was The Guise of a Gentleman. I felt like I did the least amount of true plotting or character development. It sort of felt like I ran around behind them and just quickly wrote down as quickly as possible everything that they did and said. I did a lot of research as far as procedures, pirate ships, that kind of thing. But the story itself really it was probably the easiest to write.
So that was one of my next questions on how much research do you usually put in on a historical romance?
Oh, well, tons, ongoing all the time. I research the Regency era is my specialty, and I research that just in general all of the time. I belong to a couple of different research groups that specialize in the Georgian Regency era, which is the late 1700s and early 1800s of England, and lurk a lot, and they'll ask questions and point each other to sources or whatever, and I always internalize that. I have a huge saved file. And then for each book, there's something new that I want to know about it. This book that I just finished, or that I just published recently, was a Christmas novella. And I have researched Christmas novellas, or Christmas traditions for other novellas that I had written in the past. But I'm always looking for something new, something deeper, something that I didn't already know. And I stumbled onto some really fun sources. And so that happened. So there's ongoing for the era, there's specific for each book. Some books I get a little more into, say, police procedures. And depending on the book, I might get more heavily into pirates or ships or the Navy or police procedures or what a magistrate did, that kind of thing. So many hours and hours and hours worth of research for each specific book. And then I started researching the Regency era in about probably 2005, 2006. And it's been sort of a constant theme since then. So I probably have the equivalent of a master's degree in it.
Well, I can understand, especially as many historical novels you've written. You have to know your history.
I do, and if I don't get something right, someone will call me on it. In a book that came out last April, I had planned on my heroine's sister taking her vows to the Queen. And because the book was a second in, not a true series, but second in kind of the timeline of the family series I was writing, it had to be set at this specific time, date, or at least year. And I realized about, I don't even know, 2/3 of the way through the book that the Queen didn't have what she called drawing wounds, where young ladies vowed to her due to her health. And probably the average person would never know that, but there would be some history buff out there probably another, Regency. Well, there are a lot of history buffs out there, but a Regency author certainly who would know this and who would call me on it. And so I really do try to make it as accurate as possible. If that year had a massive snowstorm, I want to mention it. Or if that year the prime minister was threatened, which that actually happened, then I want to make mention of that. So even if nothing else, it's just part of their dinner conversation, where I can just throw that in, where it's a nod towards real events, but especially if it can further my plot and my story, then I do try to keep it really, really accurate without feeling like a history lesson.
I can see. I read a book recently where a series, the first series, young man said that his brother was killed when they were 9. The next series said they were killed when he was 15. I thought,
Yeah, and that's easy to do. The series Bible is crucial for that. I remember one time I finished a book and I went back and realized that the heroine had one brother and then she had 3 brothers and then she had 2 brothers and the ages changed and the name changed. And that's what happens in a rough draft. Hopefully you catch that in the revision process, or a beta reader catches that, but not always.
it would be tricky. Okay. You have such a variety of interests and talents, and I envy it. You're very accomplished. How many of those talents and abilities do you have that you implement into your books?
Well, one that consistently shows up is the harp. I play the harp, and I sort of made a game of how many books I could at least mention the harp. Sometimes it's no more than there was a harpist at the wedding, or there was a harp standing in the corner of the music room of the house. Several of my heroines are harpists, and it features prominently. Other times it's just mentioned in passing. So that's kind of one thing that I try to throw in. Most of them, I've noticed, love to read, huh? But, that kind of appeals, I think, to the reader. Oh, I identify with her. She's a reader, too. Obviously, the reader is a reader, or she wouldn't be reading my book. So that features in. But I do try to make them different and make their interests varied, so it doesn't sound like they're all just little carbon copies of me. Most of them are much smarter and braver than I am, or they'll take more risks, or they're more thoughtful or more kind or whatever. But music is usually a big deal to them. It is to me. Most of them love to dance. I do too. So that kind of thing, just some of it bleeds in just organically, and others are placed in on purpose. I put in on purpose.
We both love the water. Have you ever contemplating writing a mermaid series?
No, I haven't contemplated writing a mermaid series, really. Although I would at some point like to branch out more into fantasy. I did publish one fantasy. It's not in print anymore, but I would like to publish others perhaps in the future. Who knows, maybe there'll be a mermaid in that one.
Is that in the near future, or?
Not the near future, no. My agent really wants me to just focus on historicals right now so that I can build that brand. But I kind of made a unofficial personal goal that by the time I reach 30 published titles, that I would see if I can branch out. I might branch out into either young adult. I really like futuristic and dystopian as well. Of course, dystopian is kind of the bad word right now, but science fiction or speculative fiction. And I also I also do love fantasy, so I might try one of those, or maybe a series of those too, to see how they work. Kind of fun to reinvent myself every once in a while,
I still think you ought to lean toward the mermaid.
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. You have several swoon-worthy Christmas novels out. What is the main difference between each one?
Between each of the Christmas novels? Well, I have 3 novellas that are out. One of them is a reunited, long-lost lovers kind of thing, kind of torn apart by the war. One of them is best friends, discovering that they care for each other, more than just friends, And one of them is kind of has a suggestion of a gothic kind of thing where she's not sure, but she thinks he might be crazy and there may or may not be a curse on his family, that kind of thing. The new one that just came out is a full-length novel, and that one, it all starts with a kiss. They barely meet, don't really notice each other. They're both fixed on other people, and then have this accidental kiss. And there's a little bit of a mystery behind it. She has no idea who kissed her. It was dark, and anyway, it wasn't terribly scandalous, but yes, it really was. So yeah, they each have a little different band.
So they sound very different.
They are very different. But I try to put the one that takes place between the two, or it takes place in an inn where these long lost lovers are sort of reunited, isn't quite as Christmas-y as the others. The only real Christmas element in it is that she is on her way to a family Christmas party. The others are a little more, have the Christmas themes or traditions featured more heavily in the story. This newest one certainly has quite a bit more of those. And some of them were just fun little tidbits that I found from old Christmas traditions that date back to the medieval times. So that was fun.
Well, I know they've got to be tremendous because I love all of your writing so far that I've read.
Thank you.
What advice have you got for upcoming hopefuls to become an author?
Well, advice. I would say one of the most important things is to be really persistent. There are a lot of really talented writers out there, many of whom I have met and read samples of their writing, just because of the amount that I volunteer, or people ask me to critique their things, or I meet them at conferences and we sit in critique groups or something. And they're really talented and they have a lot of what is required, but a lot of them never finish a manuscript, ever. I read a statistics a couple of years ago that said the average person who has the dream of writing or publishing a novel never actually finished one. They just get bored with it, set it aside, write the next one. So that would be my biggest recommendation, is to finish something. It's not publishable that's not finished. So that's the biggest thing. Another one is to be really persistent in that you keep trying. If someone tells you your writing isn't good enough, it may not be, but that doesn't mean you just throw in the towel and say, oh, I don't have what it takes to be a writer. You keep working at it and you keep doing it. Sometimes all you need to do is just to keep submitting to different people, because writing is so subjective. And just because one person doesn't love it doesn't mean that it isn't going to be loved by other people. I mean, look at all these best-selling novels out there that some people love and other people equally hate. So being persistent and keeping on until you actually get it published is a big deal. Whether you do the self-publishing route or the traditional published route, you really have to keep going and not let discouragement stop you from pursuing your dreams. And the last thing that I would say is to be humble. I have been asked to critique stories by authors or wannabe authors, writers, who really all they want is to be told, oh, this is the most amazing book I've ever read. Here's the name of my agent. Tell her I sent you, and she will make you rich and famous. And really, that's what they want. And they get really hostile and defensive if I make any suggestions for improvement. And so humility plays a big part of it. And it's a weird dichotomy because authors are both extremely fragile and extremely arrogant. Whereas you can say something bad and you're going to get one of two reactions. Oh, I don't have what it takes and I'm destroyed. Or, who do you think you are? My mom thinks this is the best book in the whole wide world. And really, we're all that way. It's just how much we say this to people, right? And I do both. I really do. Every time I get a slightly negative or, well, I think it'd be better, I go through this cycle of, who does she think she is? Or who does she think you are? Or, oh, he's right, I'm horrible. And so you just really have to work through that. And not every piece of advice you get is going to be sound. It's not going to work for you as an author, not going to work for that book, but consider it at least and see if maybe they're right that something about this either book or character or passage even isn't quite working. And maybe their suggestion isn't the one that you need to take, but maybe there's something there that can be examined. I've written several books that will never see the light of day because I was a newbie and I didn't know how to write a cohesive plot. And so that's okay because that's part of the learning process. But there's that 10,000 hour rule where you have to work at something for 10,000 hours, whether you are a carpenter or an artist or a dancer or a lawyer or whatever. You have to spend 10,000 hours studying that craft. And you could be brilliant and gifted, but if you haven't put in those hours developing that talent, then you don't really deserve to be a professional yet. Too many people are looking for the fast track and the easy way. Oh, I think I'll just write a book and then I'll just throw it out there and it'll be a bestseller. Well, you can write a book and throw it out there, but I guarantee you it's probably not going to be a bestseller. And everyone loves to cite the exceptions, and that's fine, but that's why they're cited, because they're exceptions. They're really, really rare. Most people have to do their due diligence and work and work and work and work and work at it before you can develop yourself as a writer or even just that particular book to get it to a point where it's really going to be truly meaningful or even entertaining to a reader.
Just curiosity, how many books did you write before you had one published?
Well, I wrote a bunch of little ones when I was young. Of course, my stories as a 9-year-old were, I don't know, 10, 15 pages, maybe 20. Ooh, that was long. And of course, I was doing it all by hand back then and in just a notebook. And I, too, have a stack of incomplete manuscripts as well, either because I didn't know where it went, or I tried to plot too heavily and felt like I'd already lived the adventure, or I realized this isn't enough plot to keep me going, or I have no idea who the characters are, or it was too much like another book that came out. A lot of times ideas come about the same time, and I probably wrote 10, 15 maybe stories that I completed that didn't get done, and a dozen more that are unfinished for whatever reason.
Well, I'm sure that you've made up for it.
Let's hope.
Okay. Within the next 5 years, what goals would you hope to have fulfilled?
Well, I would love to be not just an Amazon bestseller, but I'd love to be a USA Today bestseller. Actually, I really wanted to be a New York Times bestseller, but recently they changed the rules and romance authors are not included in that. So USA Today would be the best that I could hope for as far as a romance author. Of course, that would be another reason to switch to either fantasy or young adult, because they're still allowed for whatever reason into New York Times. But USA Today is very prestigious, and I really, really love to do that. I would like to have hit the 30 titles mark by then. That would be moving quickly. That would be awesome. I guess as far as writing goals, those are probably my two biggest ones. Personal goals, I'd love to learn to ride side saddle to make it more realistic so that I know exactly what my heroines can and cannot do on side saddle. I know in theory, but it would be fun to know just in practicality. So that's kind of a goal that I've set too. And I would love to go back to England sometime.
Go back to what?
England.
Oh, really? Have you been there?
I did. I went last summer for almost a month, and that was fantastic. I went for research. Speaking of research, I spent 3.5 weeks there just really studying, researching, going to museums, going to stately homes. I took 1,000 pictures, literally over 1,000 pictures. Yeah, it was intense, and I still don't feel like I saw a tenth of what I wanted to see. That was incredible. So I would, within the next 5 years, love to go back to England.
Wow. My grandfather was raised in Essex.
Oh,
And, he actually has a castle there that just is inherited from. I'd like to see what I missed out on.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, let me know when you're going. We can be traveling buddies.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Donna. This has been delightful. I've been dying to meet you and hoping one day we would meet. And this is just great because I just have really enjoyed your novels. I've read several of them.
Thank you.
And so anyway, I would like everybody to check into Donna's books and novels. She's got wonderful, wonderful novels. And is there any final word you'd like to say before we end?
Last words.
No, don't say it that way.
Final words, last words. I don't know. That almost sounds ominous. I guess I've been reading too many Halloween stories. No, I guess just about my books, I typically write on what they call the clean and wholesome side. Some people try to label them as sweet. They're not truly sweet because I have murder and mayhem and pirates and death and destruction. But I do keep it clean in that I don't have swear words. I never have on-screen sex scenes. I do have a high level of attraction and, I guess, chemistry or sensuality between main characters. And there's always at least one really hot kiss. So not truly sweet, but certainly more on that, what some people would label the clean.
Anyway, I want to thank you, and this has been delightful. And coming from us, we wish you all a wonderful reading experience and hope that you will learn the world through reading. And goodbye for now.
Thank you, Luann. Bye-bye.
Thank you.